Imagine waking up one morning. There is no refrigerator, no grocery store, no farm, no kitchen filled with food. There is only a cold landscape outside your shelter, a few fading embers from last night's fire, and the knowledge that if you want to eat today, you have to find something. Maybe berries are growing nearby. Maybe there are roots beneath the soil. Maybe you can collect shellfish along a river. But none of these foods are guaranteed, and somewhere beyond the trees, large animals are moving. Deer, wild cattle, horses, boar, perhaps even enormous creatures that would look almost unbelievable to us today. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived in a world where food had to be found rather than purchased. But that raises a fascinating question. Why did humans start hunting in the first place? Were our ancestors naturally designed to chase animals? Did they become hunters because meat was essential for survival? Or did hunting begin for a completely different reason? The truth is more complicated. Humans probably didn't wake up one day and decide, from now on, we're hunters. Hunting was likely the result of a very long process, a process involving changing climates, changing bodies, changing environments, cooperation, intelligence, and perhaps most importantly, opportunity. To understand how humans began hunting, we need to go back millions of years, not to the first humans, but to a world where our ancestors were still very different from us. Before humans became hunters. Long before humans were making stone spear points or tracking animals across grasslands, our distant ancestors were already searching for food. They lived in environments filled with plants, insects, fruits, seeds, roots, and small animals. Our early ancestors were not specialized predators like lions. They didn't have enormous claws designed to tear flesh. Instead, they belonged to a group of primates that survived by being flexible. And flexibility turned out to be incredibly important. If fruit was available, they could eat fruit. If seeds were available, they could eat seeds. If roots were available, they could dig for roots. If insects were available, they could collect them. And if an opportunity appeared to eat meat, they could take it. This behavior is called scavenging, and scavenging may have been an important step toward hunting. The first taste of meat. Meat is an unusually valuable food. Compared with many plant foods, it can provide large amounts of energy and nutrients in a relatively compact package. But there was a problem. Meat doesn't simply sit around waiting to be eaten. Other predators wanted too. Imagine arriving at a fresh carcass. You might see hyenas nearby, vultures circling overhead, big cats hiding in the grass, and somewhere in the distance, another predator could be approaching. For a small early human, approaching that carcass would be dangerous. So our ancestors needed something that many other animals didn't have: cooperation. One person might be vulnerable. A group could be much more intimidating. Several individuals could make noise, throw stones, wave branches, and drive predators away. They could then quickly take pieces of meat and retreat. This may have created an important connection between food and social behavior. Finding food wasn't always an individual activity. It could become a group activity. And once humans learned that animal flesh was a valuable resource, another possibility appeared. Instead of waiting for an animal to die, what if you could find a way to kill one yourself? That was a much bigger challenge. The problem with hunting. Large animals are dangerous. That sounds obvious today, but imagine what it meant for ancient humans. A wild animal doesn't understand that you're trying to obtain food. It doesn't know you're holding a primitive weapon. It doesn't care how intelligent you are. If threatened, it may attack. A deer can kick. A wild boar can charge. A large bovine can crush a human instantly. And prehistoric humans didn't have modern medicine. A broken bone could become a life-threatening problem. A deep wound could become infected. One mistake could end a person's life. So, why take the risk? Because the reward could be enormous. One successful hunt could provide food for an entire group. It could provide meat, fat, organs, bones, hide, and other useful materials. A single animal could become an entire collection of resources. This made hunting extremely attractive. But attraction alone wasn't enough. Humans needed tools. The stone tool revolution. Around millions of years ago, early members of the human family began producing increasingly sophisticated stone tools. Some of the earliest tools were relatively simple. A stone could be struck against another stone to create a sharp edge. That sharp edge could cut meat. It could slice through hide. It could break bones. It could help process plants. And perhaps most importantly, it allowed humans to make better use of animals they found. A sharp stone was not a spear, but it was a major technological advantage. Over time, stone technology became more sophisticated. Different shapes appeared. Different techniques were developed. Some tools became better suited for cutting, others for scraping, others for breaking or pounding. And eventually, humans began creating weapons specifically designed to help kill animals. The spear changes everything. At some point in human history, the spear became one of our most important technologies. We don't know exactly when hunting with spears became widespread, but archaeological evidence shows that early humans were using wooden spears hundreds of thousands of years ago, and possibly much earlier. Think about what a spear changes. Without a weapon, you have to get extremely close to an animal. With a spear, you can create distance. Distance means safety. Even a relatively simple wooden spear can turn a vulnerable human into a much more dangerous opponent. And humans had another advantage: throwing. Our bodies are unusually good at throwing compared with other primates. Our shoulders, arms, hands, and body mechanics allow us to launch objects with remarkable speed and accuracy. This ability may have played a huge role in hunting. A human didn't necessarily need to overpower an animal physically. Instead, we could attack from a distance. And then something even more extraordinary happened. Humans learned to cooperate during the hunt. Hunting as a team. Imagine a group of prehistoric humans tracking a herd. One person notices footprints. Another finds broken vegetation. Someone else notices fresh dung. The group moves quietly. They don't simply run toward the animals. They observe. They plan. They wait. Then they begin moving the herd in a particular direction. Perhaps several hunters spread out. Others wait ahead. The animals become confused. Eventually, one animal becomes separated from the group. That's the moment. A spear is thrown. Another follows. The animal runs. The hunters follow. This isn't simply physical strength. It's coordination, communication, memory, prediction, and patience. These abilities may have helped transform humans into effective hunters. But there was another incredible weapon. One that required no stone, no wood, no metal. It was built directly into the human body. Endurance. The human body was built for distance. Humans aren't particularly fast compared with many animals. A cheetah can outrun us effortlessly. A deer can accelerate away from us. Even many smaller animals can sprint faster. So how could humans possibly catch them? The answer may be endurance. Humans have several physical traits that help with long-distance movement. We sweat efficiently. We have relatively long legs. Our bodies are adapted for walking and running. We can regulate body temperature through sweating, and we can continue moving for long periods. Imagine an animal running away from you. At first, it is much faster, but you don't stop. You keep moving. The animal runs, then stops. You continue. The animal runs again. You continue. Eventually, under certain environmental conditions, the animal can become overheated. It needs to rest, but humans can keep going. This hunting strategy is sometimes called persistence hunting. Whether it was common among prehistoric humans is still debated, but the basic concept demonstrates something important. Humans didn't need to be the fastest predators. We could win through endurance. Climate may have changed everything. Now we need to consider the environment. Earth's climate has changed dramatically throughout human history. During ice ages, temperatures shifted, rainfall changed, forests expanded and contracted, grasslands spread across enormous regions. Animals followed these changing environments, and humans followed the animals. In open grasslands, large herbivores became abundant: mammoths, horses, bison-like animals, wild cattle, antelope, deer. These animals represented enormous quantities of energy. For a hungry group, one successful kill could mean days or even weeks of food, depending on how much was preserved and how many people shared it. But hunting large animals was dangerous, so humans developed another important skill: planning. Hunting required knowledge. A successful hunter needed to understand animals. Where do they drink? Where do they sleep? What paths do they follow? When do they migrate? Which animals are easier to approach? Which ones are dangerous? What happens when one animal becomes separated from the herd? This knowledge could be passed from one generation to another. Imagine a child watching an experienced hunter. The child learns to recognize tracks, then learns the difference between old tracks and fresh tracks, then learns where animals usually travel, then learns how wind direction affects scent, then learns how to approach quietly. Eventually, the child becomes a hunter. This means hunting wasn't simply an instinct, it was also culture. Knowledge accumulated over generations, and that may have been one of humanity's greatest advantages. The importance of fire. Fire also changed the human relationship with meat. Cooking makes food easier to chew and digest. It can also make some foods safer to eat. But fire offered another major advantage: preservation. Smoking meat could help extend its usable life. Drying could also preserve meat. This mattered enormously because successful hunting wasn't always predictable. You might kill an animal today and find nothing tomorrow. So storing food became valuable. A successful hunter wasn't simply someone who could kill. They were part of a system that allowed a group to survive periods of scarcity. And that brings us to one of the most important questions. Did humans hunt because they needed meat? The answer isn't simply yes. Were humans originally meat eaters? Humans are remarkably adaptable eaters. Our ancestors consumed different foods depending on where they lived. Some populations relied heavily on animal foods. Others consumed large amounts of plants. Fish became important in coastal environments. Seeds and grains became important in some regions. Tubers and roots were valuable in others. There was never one universal prehistoric diet. Instead, humans were opportunists. We ate what our environments could provide. And this may explain why hunting became so important. It wasn't necessarily because humans couldn't survive without meat. It was because meat could be an extremely valuable addition to the diet, especially in environments where high-energy plant foods were limited. This flexibility allowed humans to spread into an astonishing range of environments. The social side of hunting. There may have been another reason hunting mattered. It brought people together. Imagine returning to camp after a successful hunt. The animal is processed, meat is divided, people gather around the fire. Children watch, adults prepare food, stories are told, information is exchanged. The hunt becomes more than a way to obtain calories, it becomes a social event. And cooperation creates relationships. Who can be trusted? Who is a skilled tracker? Who is good at making tools? Who takes care of injured people? Who shares food? These relationships could strengthen the entire community. Some researchers have argued that cooperation around food sharing may have played an important role in human evolution. A hunter who returns to camp with a large animal doesn't necessarily eat everything alone. Sharing can create social bonds, and those bonds can increase the survival chances of everyone. But hunting wasn't always successful. It's easy to imagine prehistoric hunters as incredibly successful, but reality was probably much harder. A hunt could fail, an animal could escape, a hunter could become injured, weather could change, predators could arrive. The group could spend hours or days searching without finding anything. This is why humans likely depended on multiple food sources. Hunting was part of a larger survival strategy. People gathered, they scavenged, they fished, they collected insects, they searched for eggs, they dug for roots, they gathered fruits and seeds, they hunted animals. The genius of early humans wasn't that they became perfect hunters, it was that they became extremely adaptable. But hunting wasn't always successful. It's easy to imagine prehistoric hunters as incredibly successful, but reality was probably much harder. A hunt could fail, an animal could escape, a hunter could become injured, weather could change, predators could arrive, the group could spend hours or days searching without finding anything. This is why humans likely depended on multiple food sources. Hunting was part of a larger survival strategy. People gathered, they scavenged, they fished, they collected insects, they searched for eggs, they dug for roots, they gathered fruits and seeds, they hunted animals. The genius of early humans wasn't that they became perfect hunters, it was that they became extremely adaptable. The rise of specialized hunting. As technology improved, hunting became more sophisticated. Spears became more effective. Later came spear-throwing technology such as the atlatl. Eventually, humans developed bows and arrows. These technologies dramatically increased the distance from which animals could be attacked. But technology wasn't the only improvement. Humans also became better at understanding landscapes. They could use natural barriers. They could create traps. They could ambush animals. They could drive herds toward dangerous terrain. They could coordinate large groups. Hunting became a combination of biology, technology, and intelligence, and that combination was extraordinarily powerful. The great hunters of the Ice Age. During the later Ice Age, humans occupied enormous regions of Eurasia and beyond. In some places, they encountered animals that seem almost mythical today: woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, giant deer, wild horses, huge bovines. These animals could provide extraordinary amounts of food, but hunting them required courage and organization. A mammoth could weigh several tons. A human couldn't overpower one. Instead, hunters had to exploit weaknesses: terrain, group coordination, weapons, patience. Perhaps they targeted younger, older, or isolated individuals. We still don't know exactly how every prehistoric hunt worked, but archaeological sites show that humans repeatedly interacted with large animals, and this relationship transformed both humans and ecosystems. Hunting changed humans. Regardless of exactly why hunting began, it eventually became deeply connected to human life. Our bodies changed. Our technology changed. Our social systems changed. Our diets changed. Our landscapes changed. And humans became increasingly dependent on knowledge. A successful hunter needed to know the world around them, not just where animals were, but where water was, where plants grew, how seasons changed, how weather behaved, where predators lived, which materials could be used to make tools. In other words, hunting encouraged humans to become students of their environment. But there was a dark side. Hunting also had consequences. As humans entered new environments, they sometimes encountered animals that had never experienced human hunters before. In some regions, large animals eventually disappeared. Mammoths vanished. Giant ground sloths disappeared from the Americas. Large Australian animals disappeared. Many species declined during periods of major environmental change and human expansion. Scientists continue to debate how much of these extinctions was caused by humans, climate change, or a combination of factors. The answer wasn't identical everywhere. But one thing is clear: humans eventually became a powerful ecological force. We were no longer simply another animal responding to nature. We were beginning to reshape it. So why did ancient humans start hunting? after millions of years of evolution, the answer probably isn't one single reason. Humans likely began by taking advantage of opportunities. They scavenged. They ate insects and small animals. They collected food wherever they could. Then they learned to process animal remains. They developed better tools. They learned more about animal behavior. They cooperated. They began actively pursuing prey. And eventually, hunting became one of the most important strategies available to humans. Not because humans were the strongest animals, we weren't. Not because we were the fastest, we weren't. Not because we had the biggest teeth or claws, we certainly didn't. Humans succeeded because we combined things no other animal combined in quite the same way. Intelligence, cooperation, technology, communication, memory, and perhaps most importantly, adaptability. The beginning of a new kind of predator. When you look at a modern human, it's easy to forget how unusual our species really is. We don't look like dangerous predators. We have no claws. Our teeth are relatively small. Our bodies aren't particularly powerful. Yet our ancestors eventually became capable of hunting animals many times their own size. They crossed deserts. They entered forests. They survived ice ages. They crossed mountains. They reached islands. They entered new continents. And wherever they went, they carried the same extraordinary toolkit: their minds, their hands, their ability to cooperate, and their ability to learn. The first hunter probably wasn't a lone genius standing on a hill with a spear. It was likely an ordinary member of a group. Someone watching, learning, experimenting, following tracks, sharing food, making mistakes, trying again, generation after generation, until those small improvements accumulated, and eventually something extraordinary happened. An animal that had once survived mainly by gathering whatever nature offered became capable of deliberately shaping its environment. That transformation may have started with something as simple as picking up a sharp stone, following an animal trail, and asking a question that changed human history. What if we could catch it? And perhaps that is the real story of hunting. It isn't simply the story of humans killing animals. It's the story of how humans learned to understand the world around them, how we turned observation into knowledge, knowledge into technology, technology into cooperation, and cooperation into survival. The hunt was dangerous. It was unpredictable. Sometimes it failed. Sometimes it cost lives. But over thousands of generations, it helped create a culture in which humans could plan for tomorrow rather than simply survive today. And that ability, to imagine what hasn't happened yet, may have been one of the most powerful weapons our species ever developed. Because long before humans built cities, invented agriculture, or created civilizations, we learned to read footprints in the dirt. We learned to follow animals across landscapes. We learned to work together. And somewhere in that ancient world, the human story of hunting began.